Alrighty, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. I am Emma Martins. I am the secretary at Theresa Street. Theresa Street is our local nonprofit that aims to help raise awareness and money around our community by fun and engaging events. Our closest event is our Wiffle Ball tournament, which is our Pride project, and that's how we all started off. So we are super excited for that, and we're super excited to partner with you. A little bit about me: I am going into my third year teaching. I teach fourth grade math in Miami, Florida. I just completed my 2-year obligation with Teach for America. So I'm super passionate about working with our community, working with education backgrounds, and working with just to help our community, especially children. So you may go ahead and tell me about yourself and your organization.
So my name's Larissa Correia. I'm the program director for the Caring Network program at Child and Family Services. Our program is been around since 1996. And I've been very fortunate to be with this program for 7 years and be the program director for the last 4 years.
That's awesome. So could you tell us a little bit about what the program itself does and how it's helping the community?
Absolutely. So this is like my passion project. I was actually going to be a teacher and have my master's in teaching, but I found this program, fell in love with it. So what we do is we provide free psychoeducational groups to children between the ages of 4 and 14 that have been victim or witness to violence in either their home, school, or community. So our groups typically last somewhere between 8 to 10 weeks, although with COVID, they've definitely had to last longer. And we cover topics with them such as families, feelings, anger, really trying to help them build up appropriate coping skills, conflict resolution, bullying, safety, really helping to get the kids to identify safe people and places that they can go to, self-esteem, relaxation techniques, appropriate friendships, and really any topic that they need to talk about in group.
Awesome. So I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's good. That's good.
I was just wondering what the group settings look like. So do you guys push into schools and special centers, or do you have your own center where children and teens will come to you?
We have been very fortunate to have really great relationships with local schools. So we're primarily in the New Bedford school system, and we go and the Fairhaven school system. So primarily the elementary schools, although we've been at the middle schools as well. So the majority of our work and the most amount of referrals come from the schools and get done in the schools. So we typically are meeting with the kids either at breakfast time, first thing in the morning, or during their lunchtime. And we've developed such a great rapport with the different school adjustment counselors and the administrations that really the second school starts, the referrals start pouring in. And we actually just finished our last school year group on Friday. And then what we do over the summer is we do have a location, our office setting. And so we'll run summer groups here in our building and out in the community with them as well.
Awesome. So I think one of our main questions over at Theresa Street was just centered around what are really the biggest struggles that you all are seeing within your groups and within your settings. We're really passionate. We noticed a lot of issues with mental health around our community. So we were really passionate in finding a partnership that helped support and really gives students and youth the tools that they need to grow up with that understanding of mental health is important, just as important as physical health, and how can I nourish my mental health. So we're just wondering what are the biggest problems that you guys or issues that you all are seeing?
So coming from a trauma lens point of view, all of the kids that we're working with have, experienced a trauma in their life recently or in the past. And so for them, what our groups are hoping to do is to get them to understand first that they're not alone. So a lot of victims are isolated, or they feel like that it's their fault, or they might feel shame. And so by coming to the groups, they might not know what the other kids have experienced, but they know like this isn't the only, the only thing. A few years ago, I remember having a group of 2 boys who figured out that they were both living in group homes, and that they weren't the only ones living in group homes, or that they weren't the only ones that didn't live with their parents. And I remember it was just like this like profound like moment of like, oh, okay, it's not just me. So I think coming from that point of view, a lot of our kids, it's helping them to feel safe and supported, and coming into a space where they really feel heard. So I think for me, that's like one of our priorities. And what we've been seeing particularly, and this is not just, my program, but across the state, we actually get a grant that covers 75% of our budget typically. And it's what's called a VOCA grant, so the Victim of Crime Act, which comes from the Massachusetts Office for Victim Assistance. And we knew last year that there were going to be cuts because at the federal level, there were cuts that goes to the state. And so as MOVA was being transparent with us and saying like, hey, there's not enough funding, also they were reporting to us that for Massachusetts, they've seen a rise in need for victim services. So there's more need for victim services and less funds. So I think that across the board is one of the things that we're seeing at the state level. Which is true for us. We could, we never have enough staffing. We've seen about 220 children this year. Wow. And we have probably about 30 kids that were on the wait list for the schools that we haven't gotten to yet, that we're trying to work with to like either make sure they're first on the list in September, or that they get seen over the summer. But I think also listening in the schools, a lot of the kids across the board need social emotional support. Mm-hmm. And so that's been something that I've heard from every school that I've met with, every school adjustment counselor, is that I think this year we're starting to see some of the more particularly also the effects of the pandemic.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. I know in my school, you can definitely see the effects of the pandemic, and especially in conflict resolution, in just merely interacting with each other. The fact that a lot of these kids either had many people at their homes to interact with in not necessarily the most positive way, or they had nobody in their home to interact with. Mm. So it was like you really see both ends of the spectrum there. And yeah, I definitely agree. I think the social emotional aspect of our schools is really what's impacting our students. Mm-hmm. I was going to ask you, do you guys, so when you go into a school, is it your employees that are going in and leading groups, or are your employees going in and training the school adjustment counselors and the counselors there to be able to kind of debrief and like support students when you guys aren't there?
So we're going in. So I'm very fortunate. Part of the best part of my job running this program is I also get to do groups. So it's myself. I have a full-time employee, and then we currently have a vacant position that's a part-time position. And then part of our VOCA grant from MOVA is that we have a volunteer component. And so we have typically 7 interns that work with us, so that it's like myself and an intern going out into the schools and running the groups. So they're usually typically bachelor level, social work, psychology, criminal justice majors that are coming to help support our work. So we're out there meeting with the kids, and really also trying, reaching out to their parents every week, giving them updates, in some cases helping to support them, and really kind of connecting them with some community resources, or in a lot of cases, connecting them with mental health. So it's really nice. The building that I work out of has, in Massachusetts, what's called a lot of CBHI programs. So it's our intensive care coordination, our therapeutic mentor program, our in-home therapy program. Some of our other sites have, we have some school-based clinicians. We also have 2 offices that have clinicians. So we can help kind of connect them with resources here or with other, community organizations, which is nice.
That's awesome. So you had mentioned that you guys are 4 to 14. Do
Mhm.
you help bridge that preparation for after 14, like where students can now go to somebody else after the fact? Or, well, it sounds like you guys are giving them a lot of support, but I'm just wondering, like, what happens
when they're
yeah,
done with groups.
right.
Yeah. So some kids have come in and they've done one cycle of groups and they feel, that they've been, sorry, let me try that again. That they've really been able to understand the group and participate. They can identify safe people and places. And they might just come in for those 10 or 10 weeks or so, and that's it. Some of the other kids I've had in groups, like one group a year for like 3 or 4 years. It really depends on the child. We don't particularly see a large portion of the middle school kids, mostly because we get so many referrals at the elementary level. But we do try to make sure that that all of the kids, like if they do need resources before we close out, that we're able to connect them with that. So we had a group of middle schoolers this year. And as we were getting ready to wind down, they're heading into high school, and a lot of them wanted to get jobs for the summer. So we did an exercise with them where we did 2 exercises with them to help them really identify some of their positive strengths, like what can you put on a resume, like what makes you unique for them. And one of the boys actually came back the following week and was like, I had applied for this job, I have an interview. So it was really awesome because
awesome.
I was not, and then the other kids were like, oh, really? And then we're like sharing the link for it. So it was really awesome to see. Yeah.
That is awesome. So in terms of where you see your program going, I'm just thinking of, and this is like my teacher critical mind thinking, when they get to middle school, the hormones get crazy, everything else gets pretty crazy. Do you guys foresee the support in the groups kind of going further into that, just in terms of like less of the trauma survivors, but more of just like a general mental health, like here's kind of where you might start to see yourself falling back, here's how we can help type thing? Is that in the long run?
So the really nice thing is our agency, Child and Family, has other programs in the middle school, at each of the middle schools in New Bedford, which is really nice.
Oh, perfect.
That is actually it's either a pilot program or it's just starting out this year. So that's been really nice to know that as some of particularly our 5th graders going into middle school, we can put that support in place for them.
Right, you're feeding them into something.
And then a lot of the CBHI programs that like the therapeutic mentoring, they go up to age 21. So really there's supports that we can connect them with. And we try to always make sure that we're working with the school adjustment counselors, so that when we're done with a group, if there's something that they can help support them with too, they can. But yeah, I definitely, I know there's a huge need for mental health. And there's not enough, unfortunately, I think we could use so many more people in the field.
Especially it's like that mid 4th grade year, everything starts to switch for them. So it's awesome to see that you guys have that already in place. I was going to ask you something that the referrals that you are mentioning. How does that happen?
So we typically meet with the schools at the beginning of the school year, or I've already had some meetings so that when they go back in September, we're pretty much ready to go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So that's the nice thing about when, you work for a community organization, and New Bedford's such a small community that as you build relationships, you start to, you get to know so many people, that I can go into a meeting and they're like, I can identify this amount of kids, and we bring them the paperwork and they send it out and work with the parents, and it comes back to us. And typically by, I'd say, the middle of October, this year was a little bit different, but usually by the middle of October, we're like filled up, and we're all running, like I'm running 10 groups a week, or my staff is like running 12 or 14 groups. So yeah, we get very busy quickly.
That's incredible. 10 groups. That's busy.
Yeah. So we each typically run about 2 to 3 groups a day. Yeah.
Wow. Going from school to school, you must be ready for summer.
Yeah. I mean, it's really fun. So I threw some games over here because I'm like, that's a little bit more exciting than talking, but really it's so much fun because we try to do it in a fun way for the kids, so that everything that they're learning, it's not just like, well, here's another worksheet, or, focused on the curriculum, which I know, is what their job is at school. But during that break with us, we get to kind of do it in a different way.
So if you had one group at one school, how many times a week would you see them? Just once a week, or?
Yes. So, for example, like as I was winding down my year, I started, I had a breakfast group in a school in Fairhaven. I'd come back to the office, prep for my groups, or, do notes, meetings, things like that. And then at lunchtime, I'd go to a school in New Bedford, and they usually have more than one lunch shift. So we'd go back-to-back groups, come back, do calls to families, notes. So they'll meet with us once a week until we finish the curriculum. Sometimes they go longer with our preschooler groups, they're little, so they last, 15, 20 minutes. Yeah. Like a quick story and a coloring activity for the little ones. Their little ones might only last like 6 or 8 weeks, depending. But I had a boys group this year. They were in 4th grade. That's a tough age. Like you said, it's very tough age.
Tough group.
And it took me, I want to say, like 8 weeks to get them really like engaged and being like, I want to come to group. And then I was like, well, group's almost over, guys.
Yeah.
So they negotiated with me to extend it 3 weeks.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah. So I was like, well, I'm not going to argue with them. So we ended up extending the group for them. But yeah, it was so funny because they'd be like, oh, I don't want to go to group. I just want to have lunch with my friends. And then all of a sudden, after the group ended, they're like, when are we going to do group again? And I was like,
you're like, no, we had our time together.
I'm like, we had this. I was like, I was like, I will meet with you one more time before the end of the school year. But yeah, so it's really about, sometimes they're just very reserved, or you need that buy-in that like, they want to feel like that this is a safe space for them to be. So.
Well, that's incredible that you were able to extend that and get their buy-in. 4th grade boys are tough. They're a tough sell. You really have to put on the whole show, act and caboodle for them. One question for you. How do you feel families are? Like, do you get a lot of support from families? Is it just kind of like once they sign, that's really all the interaction is? Or do you feel like it's more of a partnership between you and your families?
I think our families are very busy. And so we try to be able to call them the best time that's available for them. Sometimes it's like 2 ships passing in the night. So we'll get them, or I'll get a voicemail, then they get a voicemail. And so I think, I think our families really like getting those updates, particularly because some of our kids have some, they really struggle in the school setting. And so they're getting calls about behaviors that are sometimes unsafe, or disruptive to the class, or aggressive. And so, or that they're struggling academically. And so sometimes it's really nice for us to be able to give a call and be like, so-and-so did a really great job in group today. And it's really nice, you know, I think for the parents to get that call. And so, yeah, I've got some great parents that I work with. And they're, you know, once they get to know us a little bit, when they open up, then we can help them like connect with some different resources.
Yeah.
Too. So yeah, I really like, and the nice thing is our program is voluntary. So anytime a kid is signed up into our program, their parents want them to be participating. So
Right. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's really great to hear. Going back to Theresa Street, I'm just wondering what the funding that we raise in the next few weeks and the weeks that we've already raised, where will that funding be used for?
So the way that the VOCA grant is distributed in Massachusetts is they give us 75% of our funding. And then the agency, so Child and Family, is responsible for the other 25%. This year we did get, because of the federal levels, we did get a $20,000 cut from our previous year. So that means that we need to raise more than 25% to meet our needs, which are mostly staffing, and supply, like to get us to and from groups, like phones, equipment, but really also, I wish I had one. I meant to grab one. Each of our kids are getting a coping skills bag. So it started during COVID when we, you know, were seeing the kids. We wanted to make sure anybody that was getting seen on telehealth had the supplies that they needed to go to group. So we were putting markers and colored pencils, a pencil, in a bag and sending it home so that when we met with them and we were like, oh, you need a notebook, they had one. We didn't want to ever assume that a kid had something. We wanted to assume they didn't have it. And the kids loved it. And then when we went back into the schools this year, we were like, COVID was still kind of an issue. So we're like, we'll give every kid their own markers, crayons. And honestly, the sense of like joy, just pure joy in getting this bag. And it started with a Ziploc bag, but those kind of kept breaking. But the sense that they're like, I get to keep this, and that it's theirs. And they would take such good care of their crayons. And I mean, like, I don't think I saw a crayon break at all this year, which is like a miracle.
Yeah.
And I think that just speaks to the fact that it was something that was important to them. So we kept the bags for the 10 weeks, and then the last day they got to take it home. And then every week we would add a different fidget in. So we got
you are like the elementary school superhero adding fidgets in.
Oh yeah. I'm like, make sure you check with your teacher or just put it in your backpack. Just like, you know, so we got little poppets this year, which are like the best hit, but I was like, they need to go in your backpack.
Yeah.
And if your teacher takes them, she owns them now. Like you never see them again. But yeah, every week just earning a little like fidget for them has just been, I think, something that they look forward to. And again, it's something that they get to take home. So if they are struggling, instead of using, you know, some of our kids, they tend to, like the first week, they'll identify that like they hit walls or, you know, they get in fights. We try to, you know, encourage them to use the fidgets, listen to music. So I think saying it is one thing, but then sending them home with some of the things that they can then do it with is a whole different thing. So part of that funding goes to helping to make sure that every kid's getting that coping skills bag.
That is so special, especially like what you just said. I think it's one thing to really just like give them the resources as opposed to being like, here are the things you can do, but now you have them in your possession. So try them the next time you find yourself in that situation. That's incredible. One more question for you. How can people support your work and mission outside of donating? And where else do you want to see our partnership go? I can remind you of that second question after you answer.
So I was focused on the second one. Can you read that one more time for me?
How can people support your mission outside of donating?
I think when you see on social media posts from different organizations like ours, down in like the Women's Center, the Youth Trauma Program, the CACs, those are all victim services providers. And in Massachusetts, there's a huge need for victim services. So I think anytime you can share information on that, it's a little bit of helpful, because I think knowing that these resources are available and they're all free are huge. I also think self-care for them at the that's important for everybody's mental health. And I think especially if you live or work with kids, I think showing them that, like, taking a few minutes of time, doing some deep breathing, it models it for them. So I think those are little things that are free that you can do
Awesome.
that are make a huge difference. Yeah.
Definitely agree. And so that second part was just, how do you want Theresa Street to further support you, or how else do you see our partnership lasting long term?
I think long term, I think just being able to spread awareness too. We greatly appreciate the donations, and letting us know about fundraisers so that we can share that information. And I think being part of this community is everybody kind of gets to know each other, and I think sharing what everybody's doing. So what Child and Family Services is doing, what you guys are doing, what other organizations, it really helps support each other. And it strengthens our community because we're working all together instead of this person's doing this person. But if you work together as a team, you're getting farther.
Definitely. And the amount of people we'll be able to reach once we all come together will definitely be impactful. Well, thank you so much for meeting with me and sharing your passion and all of that information. It was so, so helpful. And I can't wait for everybody else to hear our conversation and really just get behind you and the rest of your team that seems to be doing absolutely incredible work. I know this type of work truly gets me excited, and I'm so glad we found you guys. I'm so glad we get to work with you for years to come. So thank you so much for joining me. And that's all for today.
Thank you so much for having me.